Todd Blanche rescinds Trump's anti-weaponization fund ahead of nomination hearing. Reuters reported that the acting attorney general canceled a compensation fund before a confirmation vote. NPR and NBC described the move as part of negotiations with senators who had questioned the program. The practical effect is not just political messaging. It changes whether allies who claim they were targeted by federal investigations have a dedicated federal payment path. The formal order is the first record to check, because it shows what authority the department says it used. A Senate Judiciary Committee response would show whether the nomination fight now shifts back to votes and oversight questions. Any court filing from affected applicants would show whether the cancellation becomes litigation. For Item 1, the next real consequence will come from a dated Justice Department document, a committee vote, or a court record, not anonymous predictions. Until one of those records lands, the cleanest read is that the payment channel has been withdrawn while the confirmation fight continues. That record sequence matters because the fund was presented as compensation for a past abuse claim, while its cancellation now tests whether Congress, courts, or department leadership define the boundary. If senators ask for written assurances, those answers could become the public roadmap for what happens next. Monday morning. Capital One says it closed Trump Organization accounts over money laundering concerns. Reuters and NPR report that the bank is asking a judge to dismiss the lawsuit filed by affiliated businesses. The filing says hundreds of accounts were shut in 2021 after an internal compliance review. It disputes the claim that the decision was retaliation over January 6. Instead, the company points to account risk findings that it says predated the political argument. The issue now is whether a court accepts that explanation or lets discovery move forward into bank records and executive communications. The next docket entry matters because it can narrow the claims, preserve them, or force more evidence into public view. A plaintiff response would show whether the businesses can identify a contrary timeline. Regulatory comments or market filings could add a second paper trail. For Item 2, the consequence turns on the judge's order and the records behind the closures. That timing matters because a dismissal would keep the dispute focused on pleadings, while discovery could expose internal risk memos and communications with clients. The record to watch is not a campaign statement, but the next court order explaining which claims survive. That means the legal record, not campaign rhetoric, decides whether the closures were compliance decisions or unlawful retaliation. This is decisive. Suspect in shooting at Idaho fast food restaurant died from self-inflicted gunshot wound, police say. AP, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, and NBC report that investigators say the attacker who opened fire at an In-N-Out in Twin Falls later died from a self-inflicted wound. Reports also describe an armed bystander distracting the gunman. Local officials are still reconstructing the timeline. The public question now is how authorities account for the victims, the response, and any warning signs before the attack. The next police briefing should clarify the sequence of events and whether officers believe the attacker acted alone. Coroner documentation can confirm the cause of death. Official victim updates matter because early casualty details often change after families are notified. For Item 3, the consequence is local and immediate. Families need confirmed facts, prosecutors need a closed evidence record, and the community needs to know whether officials see any remaining threat. The location also matters because the restaurant scene involved workers, customers, and responders in a fast-moving public space. If authorities release body camera timelines, emergency call logs, or a final investigative summary, those records will determine how the response is judged. The next official summary should also explain weapon recovery, witness interviews, and whether store security procedures affected the outcome. The final review should be public and dated. Saudi prince concerned over Trump's Iran strike plan. Axios. Bloomberg, Axios, and regional outlets report that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman raised concerns as President Trump weighed plans for major strikes connected to Iran. The dispute matters because Gulf governments are trying to limit regional escalation while Washington debates military options. It also raises questions about legal authority and diplomatic off-ramps. Confirmed diplomatic messaging should be separated from speculation about targets or timing. A public statement from Riyadh would show how directly the kingdom wants to pressure Washington. A White House statement would show whether the administration is emphasizing deterrence, negotiation, or operational secrecy. Tehran's response would shape the risk of retaliation. Congressional language about war powers would signal whether lawmakers plan to challenge the plan. For Item 4, the next consequence will show up in official regional security statements or congressional action, not unsourced claims about private planning. The regional setting matters because Saudi leaders have to balance ties with Washington against the risk of missiles, energy disruption, and public anger across the Gulf. If diplomacy advances, the signal will be coordinated language from capitals, not dramatic leaks about strike lists. Energy markets and base security are the practical pressure points, so official posture changes would be the clearest signal. That signal is decisive. Russian and Ukrainian strikes kill 14 on both sides. Reuters, Al Jazeera, France 24, and CNBC report deadly cross-border attacks. The reports include Ukrainian drone strikes inside Russia and Russian attacks affecting Ukrainian communities. The immediate human cost is clear. The larger question is whether the exchange changes military tempo, civilian evacuations, or diplomatic pressure. Casualty updates from local governors are the first records to watch. Air defense claims from both militaries need independent checking because each side has battlefield incentives. Hospital and emergency service updates can confirm whether the toll rises. Infrastructure reports will show whether the strikes damaged energy, logistics, or housing targets. For Item 5, the consequence turns on whether the attacks remain a grim daily pattern or become the trigger for a wider retaliation cycle. The safest read is to track dated official casualty figures and verified damage before treating either side's claims as settled. The timing also matters because both governments often announce partial battlefield accounts before outside checks are possible. If evacuation orders, power outages, or rail disruptions follow, that would show the exchange is affecting civilian systems beyond the immediate casualties. Those downstream effects would reveal whether the attacks are isolated incidents or part of a broader campaign against infrastructure. Verified damage reports should anchor the next assessment now. Today. Gaza overnight Israeli strikes kill at least 8. France 24, Al Jazeera, the South China Morning Post, and Israeli outlets report new deaths as fighting continues despite renewed diplomatic language from Washington. The figures differ by outlet. All of them point to a worsening civilian toll and continued uncertainty over whether the military will pause, withdraw, or expand operations. The next health authority casualty update is the first record to watch. An Israeli military statement would show whether officials describe the strikes as targeted operations or part of a broader campaign. Mediator comments from the United States, Egypt, Qatar, or regional partners would show whether talks are moving or stalling. Aid agency access reports would reveal the civilian effect beyond the death count. For Item 6, the consequence is humanitarian and diplomatic. Until officials publish a dated operational change, the story remains active conflict plus contested diplomacy. The record sequence matters because ceasefire proposals can sound active even while operations continue. If aid corridors reopen, hostage talks resume, or military units announce a verified shift, those dated changes would matter more than broad diplomatic optimism. Those facts would show whether diplomacy is changing conditions on the ground or merely running beside continued combat operations. Aid access, evacuation routes, hospital capacity, and hostage talks are the markers to follow.